actively working with Doc using this Testenium, for example, and it's one of the fantastic. Well, I don't want to talk just about Testenium for the moment, but then I'll leave this to Doc and explain it further technically. The advantage, of course. Later, the pain points, I would say, is at this moment of time when I'm associated with leading the overall test cycle within my organization. Of course, as a freelancer and as a contractor, it becomes imperative for me to be scalable, fast, and come up with better solutions for the clients, wherein I had been working with Selenium, with Cypress, the other tools as well. The pain point which I want to highlight in most of those frameworks is the scalability. For example, the setup time, the knowledge which you need initially to set it up. Of course, many of the folks will really question me in terms of Cypress that, yeah, it's easy to set it up and you can just start writing your test. Well, to start writing your test, you also need to know the syntax in Cypress, right? You need to install Node and whatnot. Selenium, everyone knows about it, whether you talk about JavaScript, Java, or C#, whichever. It's an uphill task. You need to know a lot of it. It's not all that simple. And then it's flaky. That's where I got in touch with Doc. It's been quite some time now. We are in touch, and he introduced me to Testenium. Trust me, it's not just for the word of mouth, but I had been using it. It's very easy, especially with the new feature, which is like the voice recognition, which you can just say, and then it does what you say to do exactly. I'm a big fan of it, I would say, and it's saving a lot of, let's say, I wouldn't call it saving the manpower, but the number of hours wherein now I get to, or my team basically gets to work on the additional items or explore more areas rather than just saying the web automation. No, that's just a part of it. The browser automation is just a part of the overall automation thingy which is going on in the market right now. Whenever we talk about automation, everyone jumps either to Selenium, which was in the past, and now everyone is like Cypress. And all they show is the web UI. Click on different elements, assert on different elements, and this is what the expectation is, the text and whatever. So this Testenium is out of those, I would say. And I wouldn't want to take much of your time, let's say from the user perspective, who's actually using Testenium, but then I'm also associating it and I'm also trying to market it as well for my fellow folks to try and use it. Sudha is also using it. Sudha, up to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. I will invite Sudha. She'll be talking more about how the industry is doing and including mobile test automation as well. Yeah, Sudha, you are there.
Yeah, thanks, Doctor, and thanks, Rohit. As you've heard from Doctor, my name is Sudha. I've been working as a developer initially for the first 4 years of my career, and it's been like 8 years now in the QA industry, mostly as an estate and leading teams offshore. I was able to second every word that Rohit just told me. I think most of us are from a QA background here. Nevertheless, we might have heard about QA processes that we go through in the company. So I thought I would just walk you guys through a high level of my presentation. Guys, let me know if you are able to see my screen while I share it. I hope that's an S.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Thanks, Doctor. Yeah. So I think we've already had a similar session where we had a very nice discussion about API testing and how the industry tools are very different from what Testenium does. So this is like more of putting everything together. So I thought I'd start with a 3-layer architecture of a software, which most of us are familiar with, so that we can correlate with the type of testing that we do for each of these layers. So just to start with, you see the front or the top layer is the presentation layer or the user interface layer, which is what our clients, the end user, sees. So this layer is what Rohit was talking about. So most of the emphasis is given to this layer, like UI testing, web UI automation, and everything a QA engineer would think about earlier was just this layer. But I think the complexity and the issue lies deep inside. So we'll get there. But as you see, the topmost layer, which is the presentation layer, is just what the user sees and what the user kind of connects with, and where the user gives an action so that we get the data from them. So when talking about this UI layer, we also have these main aspects that we test on the right-hand side, which is mostly the visual design aspect of it, and also the functionality that lies tied up with the UI layer of it. Sometimes usability, depending upon the product, we have accessibility and usability testing that we do. A part of performance and compliance, just to make sure it adheres to the user interface standards in market. So these are most significant types of testing that we've been doing on the presentation layer or the UI layer. Also talking about the UI layer, UI automation comes in picture. So Selenium WebDriver, which is still being used mostly, and I know most of us have been transitioning to Cypress as well. But again, this is a very, very time-consuming part where we kind of design a framework, put different components, and as Rohit said, kind of having a framework, designing a framework which is going to be maintainable in the upcoming years is the challenge. It's just not about writing a test. It's about making the entire framework a bit more scalable and maintainable. So it's that part where we'll have to make it a bit robust. That is where the challenge lies in. So going next, we can see the logic layer, or what we call the business layer. So this layer is where the major business logic, like the calculations or what's expected out of a logic, goes in. So I think in the current world, it's mostly the APIs and microservices. So on the right-hand side, again, we see what the tests we do on this particular layer, like on a high level, we do validations on these business logics to check if it works as expected. We also see if the request can be forged, or kind of malicious requests can be sent to our database. We do that kind of testing. We do integrity checks and processing time to know if the API call is able to put and get requests in the expected response time. So all these kind of testing goes into this business layer, mostly the API testing part. And the last layer, or the deepest layer, is the database layer. So I think most of us does not even talk about this layer, but this is where the most complexity lies in. So as you see on the right-hand side, we do a lot of structural database testing using query languages. We also do functional testing to see if we kind of able to read and write the DB as expected. There is a lot of non-functional testing as well going on, like load and stress testing, to see if the server is able to kind of hold on to that amount of data coming in a given time. So there's a lot more than this which goes in terms of testing all these layers, and there are layers, I mean, even more deeper than what I'm talking about. So this 3-layer architecture is just a hint about how much of testing we'll have to do. And when I talk about each and every layer of testing, it also is connected to tools that we used to kind of get them tested. So I'm just going to talk a bit more on automation on a very high level again. So what you see is a very enterprise level design of an automation framework, may it be web UI or API or mobile app automation. These components are more or less common. We might adhere to different models, like page object model, like different keyword driven, data driven, or hybrid, but then the components remain almost the same in most of our frameworks. So the very high level itself appears a bit more complex. So you can just imagine how much of skills and design time we'll have to put in to kind of build a framework which can be a bit more robust and maintainable, and kind of presentable to the business as well. So talking about that, I've attached a very, very quick screenshot of my own mobile automation framework. On the left-hand side, you can see most commonly used components like the config, which has got all the configuration related coding in it, the feature file following the gherkins. So what you see is a C# based framework. So we got SpecFlow, which is the gherkins way of writing the feature files, the hooks, which is the initialize hooks. Anybody working on SpecFlow would know it. So you see so much of components just for a very simple framework. And to make it more maintainable, you'll need so much of components like the utility files that you see down there, like commonly used gestures, file helpers, extension methods, and so much. So this has to be decided at the very first place so that any engineer who comes in and starts automating would kind of feel the framework much more familiar and easy to kind of maintain it. Otherwise, it would really end up in a chaos. So this is where most companies kind of struggle with, because a person X kind of creates a framework, a person Y comes in, then starts adding test scenarios, a person Z then doesn't have any clue of what scenarios have already been automated because there's no proper way of writing the gherkins file. So, I mean, kind of investing time in automation or manually testing a product is where we are losing our time. I mean, most of our time. And that was talking about automation. But there's one more big picture most of the QA engineers in a company struggle with, which is the CI/CD part. So imagine I'm going to automate 100% of my application, which is hypothetical. But then considering I'm going to do that, if I don't have a proper pipeline which kind of connects with my developer source code to implement or execute these test scenarios, the automated scenarios, it's kind of mere waste. All my time and effort which has gone into automation is of mere waste. So I think now we have started kind of interacting with the DevOps team, and we are in a position where we'll have to upskill our knowledge, not just in automation, but also in DevOps, kind of writing a pipeline where the automation test is integrated with the developer's code to continuously integrate them, and also to continuously deploy our product after the tests have been passed. So this kind of space where the existing companies are, where they expect a QA engineer to kind of manually test it, automate the feature, kind of connect it in CI/CD pipeline, do all the quality checks, pass all the quality gates, and then deliver. It's not an easy process. So I think this is just a very, again, a high-level scenario of what's going on in today's CI/CD pipelines. We're struggling to put our test in the continuous delivery or deployment tools. So I've been speaking so much, and end of day, we see that we've been using a number of tools for each and everything that I just said. Most of us must have used one or the other tools for these purposes, like for device forms. I'm working on mobile applications most of my time. So I've been using device forms to test my application on different models of devices, different OS versions, on multiple browsers. For UI testing, I know most of us use Selenium WebDriver or Cypress. We use debugging tools for proxy purpose. We use a very number of API testing tools. We are familiar with a couple of them. We use tools for load testing and stress testing, CI/CD tools, reporting, and the list just goes on. So just imagine a company will have to kind of invest in so much of tool to just pass all the quality gate and to get a product out for release. I think that's kind of too much, and it's a bit more complex than we talk. So what if there's going to be just one platform where we could replace all these tools? I think that's the agenda of this entire meeting, and you guys would know the answer by now. It's Testenium. As Rohit said, I've also been associated with Dr. Aras and the product for a while now. So it's pretty awesome to a point where any type of testing that you would like to do, name it API testing or UI testing or non-functional testing like load testing, database testing, encryption, everything in kind of one robust platform. I think it's like a cup of cream for any QA engineer like us. So I think I'd like to pass it on this to Doctor to give us like a proper walkthrough of all the advantages of Testenium. I think like many of you, I'm all equally excited to hear from Doctor.